since it's such a small group of us, it will allow us to have a more intimate conversation in regards to your specific needs. Um, so let's just jump right in. Um, we always begin our presentations with the State Board of Education strategic plan goals, and if you've ever been a part of any Mississippi Department of Education's professional developments, you are well aware of these. So I won't read those to you. And we also share our vision and our mission. So again, this is our agenda for today. Again, we're going to tailor it for your specific needs, but we will be discussing the intervention policy, the guidance document that can help you in um, developing your teams and your processes, the components of MTSS. We will also talk about the tiers, the 3 tiers, the documentation packet, and if time allows, we'll go over some scenarios, and then we have some time for questions. And at the end, we'll provide you with some additional resources. Um, this is a link. You will have a copy of the presentation, so you have direct access to a link that will lead you directly to some additional resources that can assist you as well. We use this activity in several of our presentations on our activity. And since it's such a small group of us, we'll just have a conversation on whether you agree or disagree with these following statements. So the interventionist is responsible for the students who are struggling. If you agree with that statement, disagree with that statement, or have any thoughts in regards to it, you can unmute yourself and just share openly with us.
Are you showing someone trying to log in? Is it working now?
I am not. Do you see that, Jada?
Usually it'll show me somebody's been put in the lobby or in a waiting room, but I don't see anything. Got it? Okay. All right. Hey, Matt, do you mind if I ask a couple of questions before they respond?
Sure.
Just because we are a small group and we want to make sure that we're kind of hitting your needs. So you guys at the secondary level, do you have an interventionist? Because on your PD request, it does say interventionist, and I just want to make sure.
Oh, here he is. He's back.
Okay.
I know Warren Central High School does have 2 interventionists. I'm not sure about the other high school.
Okay, so one of them does for sure. Okay, so you guys have 2 high schools then. Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
In my mind, I only had 1 high school. Okay, well, let me ask you this too. So on here on the call, we've got our TST members. Who else? Like, what other roles do we possibly have that I don't have written down? An interventionist.
I'm in the junior high, and the junior highs do have interventionists as well. And sometimes they play a dual role, like I'm the interventionist and the TST coordinator at my junior high.
Okay. Okay.
And then we had someone to put in the chat.
Oh yeah, I posted in the chat that River City Early College High School, we're a program of the 2 high schools. We do not have an interventionist.
Okay. Okay. So your teachers are doing your tier 3. Now, you said this is an early what program? Explain it to me.
It's the River City Early College High School. So it's a program of the 2 high schools. So we have students that are zoned for both high schools.
Okay. So tell me this, is there any type of selection process for them to attend this particular high school from their original?
Yeah, so yeah, there is a selection process. They go through an application process, but priority is given to low income and first generation college students. And then names are sent to North Carolina to a lottery system.
Okay, so you have these students that we're trying to move them into the college level, maybe like you said, for the first time, and then if some of them are struggling academically at any point, then your teachers are intervening for them. Okay, got it. Great, thank you. All right, Matt, I'm sorry, I just was wrapping my brain around everything.
Okay, I mean, that's fine. And now that we have, we can pretty much, we can bypass this activity if you like, and just move forward, because you know that it's more than just the interventionists who are involved in, or who's responsible for struggling students. You all know that. It's the teacher, it's whoever's providing the interventions, the administrators, or any other support person who's directly working with that student instructionally. So you all are all aware of that. So let's just move forward. I'm sure you're familiar with State Board Policy 41.1. Anything that we do in education, we're guided by policy, and this is the policy that guides us through the MTSS process, where each school district is responsible for implementing a tiered system of supports. So you all are aware of that. We won't talk about the Literacy-Based Promotion Act because this is secondary. However, I will say you should have some children soon to be trickling in to the secondary, especially junior high or in high school, who have taken the third grade assessment and who may have had some struggles there. And that information should be found in a cumulative record. Those students should have had an RRP developed for them. So you always want to keep a close eye on those particular students once they come to the secondary level, to make sure they're continuing to grow and that those learning gaps are continuing to close. So the MTSS guidance document. We put together this document to help schools and districts modify and support their MTSS processes. And it can just, serve as a review for you all in terms of the various components of MTSS. And the document is also located on our website. So MTSS defined, we know that MTSS is a framework for effective team-based problem solving that is data-informed, evidence-based, and flexible. And you'll hear us talk about data all throughout our discussion this morning. I don't know if I'm having internet issues.
Yes, sir. Something's going on.
Here, Matt, let me just pick up, and then whenever you're ready, you can join us again. Okay, so what Matt was saying with the definition of MTSS, we just want to make sure that you guys are making team decisions. So do you all have your teams in place at each of your schools?
I'm sorry, is it staticky for everybody or is it just me? Like if I need to switch computers, I just need to know.
It's not staticky on my end. Do y'all want to, if you want to leave and join back, anybody who wants to leave and join again, just see if that helps?
It's very staticky for me. But I
Okay.
had trouble getting in from the beginning.
Me also, it's staticky.
Okay, I'm fine. I think it must be the Wi-Fi out in the school buildings. So, you like Ms. Brantley said, you might want to log off, log back in, try a different device, try maybe a cell phone. I wish I knew a better solution. Sorry.
Okay. Matt, let me, if you don't mind, Matt, do you want to stop sharing and let me try to share off my Wi-Fi and see if that helps you a little bit with what pulling on yours?
Yeah, that'll help. Yeah, let's see what's going on. Okay. There we go. Okay.
Okay. As Matt was saying, MTSS, it is flexible. So you guys being at the high school level, you are going to be much different actually than your elementary schools that are in your district, and we know that and we understand that. I wanted to ask you guys, and the question that I had just a moment ago when I think we were cutting in and out was, have you got your team set up in each building?
I have the team set up in my building.
Okay, so kind of still working out some of your team situation maybe. Your selection for your team process, you should definitely have an administrator. So a lot of times it's an assistant administrator who is part of our teams. A counselor is usually part of the teams. Excuse me. The classroom teacher, of course, if the child is in more than one class, which will occur at secondary level, you try to have all of those teachers involved. But because we know that you can't necessarily pull every teacher that the student has on their schedule at one time, then we say, try to schedule the team meetings so that you can get as many of those teachers as possible. But we know that, some of them might have to be in the classroom at that point, or if it's in the morning, they may have, duty on the ground somewhere or be a bus driver. So we know that you kind of have to be a little bit flexible with your teams as well. But if you do have team meetings and you have teachers who are not present, who are teachers of the particular student you're discussing, just make sure that you all are documenting what was discussed in the team and then in the team meeting, and then share that information with those who were unable to attend. So that's something that we just feel like is really important. Any questions about the team situation? Okay. All right, so we know that we're intervening for all of our students, and we're not just intervening because we're trying to utilize MTSS as a pre-referral process. So we are intervening with our low-performing students and those who maybe are our higher performing students who maybe just need a little intervention from time to time to get through certain, say, units or subject areas. And I had a great question in the chat from April. I think that it's up in my chat, asking about specific interventions for subject areas such as biology and economics. So I'll get to that in just a few minutes. I didn't want you to think that I didn't see it. Okay, do you guys have in place at the high school level some collaboration and some partnerships with community members that are also supporting you all with the MTSS process, or do you have any ideas in place for reaching out? I don't know if you're a PBIS district or PBIS schools in which you reach out to your community to help provide those incentives for your students, but I didn't know if you had anything in place as far as your community members. Okay, so PTO, definitely a great resource, keeping them involved, helping them to understand what MTSS is, I think is also important, because I have noticed just from experience, for example, at ball fields and things, you know, a lot of times parents are at the ball field and they're discussing, hey, my student is struggling or my child is struggling, or, you know, and those PTO members that are aware of the MTSS process and intervention and what's available can also kind of help you disseminate that information to parents who maybe are concerned about their students. Yesterday, I was at a district and I had elementary and high school in the training, and they told me that they actually post their MTSS meeting schedule for their parents. So even those who maybe aren't specifically invited because of a student, it still goes out there so that their entire parent community or family community sees, hey, this is something that's really big and important, this MTSS process or intervention process. And so if they have concerns or questions, they can also begin to start asking questions. So it just kind of makes it out there. You know, it's transparent for everybody to see that this is something that occurs that helps support our students. All right, so you guys are the ones who are in charge of helping your other stakeholders and your fellow staff members, your coworkers, to understand the importance of the MTSS process. And sometimes that's really challenging at the secondary level because, you know, we often get in our silos of teaching certain subject areas, and we're good at what we know and we stick with what we know, and sometimes we have to kind of get out of that comfort zone. And so you guys are here to help them by answering questions and problem solving for them to kind of help them feel more secure in supporting their students through the intervention process. So let's talk about resources, because you guys are the shared leadership team. I'm considering all of you part of my shared leadership team, okay? So as far as a subject area like biology, so one of the questions that you guys had, and I'm kind of jumping ahead and we'll get to these slides in a minute, and I might say I've already covered that information. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about was, if a student is struggling in biology, we really have to get to the core of what is the deficit area, okay? So why is the student struggling in biology? So rather than trying to think of, well, let's intervene in the area of sciences and biology, is it that reading that is keeping that student from being successful in biology? Is it reading at the word level? Is it reading at the comprehension level? Is it because the student can't read this informational text, this scientific text in biology? Is it because the student is not familiar with the vocabulary, for example, that's in biology text? You know, you have a lot of Greek roots in biology. So think about it from those terms. Do we need to do a little more diagnostic assessing to see where we really think we're going to get the biggest bang for our buck as far as an intervention for a child struggling in biology? Now, if the child is not struggling in, say, social studies or English, but he is struggling in biology, then that's really good information for the team to consider and think about. Okay, he's reading in social studies, or she's reading in social studies and math class and all of these other classes, but he's not performing in biology. So what exactly is it? Okay. If you do decide that it is actually the biology information and that actual content of biology, then I would suggest remediating in those reading skills that you utilize in that classroom, you know, helping that student to utilize those, the bold print, the headings, the subheadings, any graphics that are available, Maybe you could use something like News ELA and pull some of that content information from a lower level text that's going to also teach that student the same content that's in that unit or that chapter in the biology book. I also would have to ask if it is biology and if it wasn't a subject area, which I'm just saying if, possible scenario, then is it a behavioral issue with that particular class? Does the student have too many friends in that one particular class? Too many opportunities to not do well in biology. So then that would kind of be some conversation to have as a team and discuss with the counselor to decide, is it more of a, we need to get some positive behavior plan in place? Talk to parents, definitely. Is the student absent excessively in a class, such as the biology class, and maybe they're not absent in the other classes? So those are some things to consider if that's where the struggle is occurring. All right. One bullet point on this slide that I did want to point out too is the last one, support with fidelity and sustainability. You guys as the leadership team are really also there to make sure that within your building that interventions are occurring, because a lot of times at the secondary level, it's that scheduling piece and making sure we find the time, and it is stressful, and I know it is. And sometimes we can kind of push it to the side and say, well, I didn't have time to work with that student today, or I didn't have time to provide intervention today. So we always just want you to make sure as a school that you are having face-to-face teacher intervention time with students, and it is happening with fidelity and integrity, and that you're sustaining those interventions. School climate is so important. Again, you guys kind of helping us with that mindset of this is going to help our students. If someone says, well, I don't have time to intervene because I've got to teach, world history because we're going to have the test or whatever, or U.S. history because we're going to have the test, then what I would like to say in that situation is if my child is struggling with reading or with other areas, they may not perform well on that U.S. history test. So, let's don't just teach to the test. Let's make sure that these children have those underlying skills to be able to perform on the test. Okay, this is a checklist that you guys, if you use the URL code that Matt showed you earlier, it's available as a resource, but I can also email it out to you. The shared leadership checklist is something that you guys can use at your team level meetings. It just kind of keeps you on task as far as checking off who's present in the meeting, what information we're looking at as far as what data we're looking at, what we know about this student. If the student already is part of a special population, it just kind of helps you staying on task with those meetings, kind of streamlining those meetings, because I know that sometimes we can get in there, especially when we have several teachers at a time, and everybody's kind of given their input. So this just helps make sure we've covered our bases in the meeting. We've talked about what we need to talk about, and we're staying on task. Okay, so what do you guys use for your universal screenings and progress monitoring? Let's start with universal screening. What do you guys use for universal screening?
I need you to speak up.
Would the iReady diagnostics be considered universal screenings? They do universal screenings in the elementary schools with STAR, Dibbles, stuff like that, but we don't do that on the secondary level. In the junior high, 7th and 8th grade, they still do iReady diagnostics, but that stops in 8th grade. They don't do any of that in high school.
Okay, so, and that's a perfect statement, because one thing that we tell high schools is you may not have an official screener, like you mentioned, iReady. Some schools use STAR, for example, but you guys have data that you can utilize as your screener data. So what we suggest is maybe meeting as grade level teams and looking at, okay, who are our students that we think we are concerned about? The students you feel like you might be concerned about, write their names on a spreadsheet, type them in on a spreadsheet, and then on that spreadsheet also enter any information such as, have they failed any of the state tests that they have already taken, have already completed, or have they been retained in the past, especially if you have a student who has multiple retentions. I consider that a piece of screener data, even though it's not something that we're purchasing to screen students. Looking at office referrals, so I would have a column on that spreadsheet for office referrals. I would have a column on that spreadsheet that told me if that student had any outside testing that mom or dad had turned in, you know, if it's a student who has dyslexia, if the student came to us, say we're high school and they came to us from the junior high with a 504, I would just make sure that I listed out those possible problematic situations as far as listing out those students that we might be concerned about. And then once you plug in that data, you'll kind of see a pattern of, okay, yeah, these are the students we need to be concerned about, you know, and then let's check in with those classroom teachers. Let's make those classroom teachers aware of each of these students. And every teacher, and I know it's more difficult at the secondary level, but every teacher should know if they have students who have repeated, or if they have students with an IEP, or if they have students with a 504. All of that information we should know about our kids anyway. Okay, we have to make sure that progress monitoring aligns with the deficit area. And so one good thing that was identified on your request for training was, you know, what kind of progress monitor do we use at the secondary level? So if it was a situation like, let's use biology again, let's go back to biology. Once you've diagnosed what the problem is, and if it is in fact reading, then you're going to use some type of reading progress monitoring. So if you've decided that the child's struggling with vocabulary and you're intervening with, say, those Greek roots that you know that the child needs to be familiar with to be able to read these higher level texts, then you're providing instruction and intervention in the area of those roots and utilizing those and breaking apart multisyllabic words and understanding multisyllabic words that are similar, you know, those root trees and things that you can work on. So you could actually provide progress monitoring that is assessing their mastery of utilizing these different Greek roots, okay? If you've decided that the issue is more of at just the plain old word decoding level, the student just really can't read the text word for word accurately, you know? So someone is intervening in the area of word reading, then I might provide an oral reading fluency check. Say it's a tier 2 student, it would be every other week. Sometimes I would provide an oral reading fluency check that was a grade or 2 below grade level, because that was going to be something they could be more fluent with, and then we would kind of work our way up as far as checking for that reading accuracy and fluency. If it's in the area of behavior, you know, you could have behavior charts, and you would, if you're doing percentages, like percentages, let's say that we have goals, and you know there's 5 days in a week, and the student meets, you know, he meets his goals 3 out of 5 days. You know, I could go ahead and transfer that into a decimal or a fraction. I'm sorry, I'd lost my train of thought there for a second. Go ahead and make it a percentage, okay? So once you have got your percentages, you can start plotting those on a progress chart too. So your team is actually in charge of deciding, hey, how can we progress check? What can we do to fit this intervention the best? And at the secondary level, do you guys have any interventions that have a standard protocol, such as let's say a boxed program, for example, or a computer program, for example, in which, you know, it's pretty much scripted and it comes with progress monitor? Do y'all have any of that? Okay. So your
department does use ClassWorks, and that goes all the way up into 12th grade.
Okay, so ClassWorks might have its own progress monitoring piece, which would be fabulous. So there's one resource there. And again, you could use Dibble's probes if you want to, if it's a reading issue. You know, you have to be creative, and this is where that flexibility comes in. We do have a new approved intervention list that is part of this presentation. If you guys have funds this year, maybe some of the ESSER funds or any other funds available, you might consider purchasing some more scripted programs for the high school. I know Rewards is on that list, and Rewards works with those roots that I was talking about, works with those multisyllabic words. But you know, those are all, again, local decisions for you guys to make.
And Jada, this is Stephanie. I just wanted to put a note here that we have asked our schools not to use iReady as their progress monitor because it is so broad, and we have asked them to switch to a more of a curriculum-based measure.
Right. And that is true. You know, some schools do use it. Some schools will use it, but then they also will add a piece. So, yes, trying to add something that is more tied to your specific deficit area and not just an umbrella type progress monitor. Okay. Not going to go over all of this tier 1 information, but I do want to say that from being a former high school interventionist and from visiting around the state and providing trainings and technical assistance, we still have kind of a long way to go with helping our tier 1 classroom teachers to provide instruction that is differentiated, and we can utilize, you know, those smaller groups sometimes in the tier 1 setting, because just that blanket whole group instruction every day, sometimes we're not hitting those students that we need to really hit, who are I mean physically hit, that kind of sounded funny when I said that, but reaching those students that we need to reach that are struggling in the classroom when we're just providing that PowerPoint and going over that information with those students. And also thinking, if we're providing a PowerPoint every day and we're simply teaching from that PowerPoint and presenting that information from the PowerPoint, are the students really analyzing that information? Are they diving into that information? Is it really their information, or is it just kind of standing in front of them and just kind of talking and they're not really engaged, you know? So I have to really, you know, we have to change up. How are we going to present this information? What are we going to do with this information? How are we going to really dive into it and make it our own? So, you know, maybe some professional developments or some PLCs on smaller group settings, and, you know, changing up some of the ways that we do. And I know I've been teaching for so long. There's things I'm comfortable with. And I think that every teacher has the idea of being that person who reaches every student, but when you're not comfortable with things like smaller groups or changing up the way that you present, I mean, I understand that. Nobody wants to do something they're not comfortable with. So just, that's why I was saying maybe some PLCs and some professional development with that. Make sure that we help teachers to understand that we are sticking to grade level content and rigor. We're not saying we want you to teach this child 8th grade standards when this child is 11th grade. We're teaching 11th grade standards. Now, we might have to provide some intervention time in which we are scaffolding and reaching those holes and plugging those holes, but the goal here is to be back up to the grade level standard, okay? I don't want to go down and stay down. I want to scaffold back up, and I want to make sure that I'm trying to pull some of those supports away as we move forward. You know, I know that sometimes over supporting can be can occur. I'm probably guilty of over supporting sometimes, you know, providing too many accommodations for a student, or, you know, because we have the heart that we want them to succeed, but we also want to be able to pull some of that back so that they can be independent as well. Okay. So whenever I was talking about your classroom teachers really need to know your students. These are the things that we were discussing that they really need to be familiar with. And these are the things that go on that profile sheet that is part of the documentation packet. All right, so are you guys familiar with the documentation packet and the things that you must complete? Okay. Are you familiar with the Access for All guide? There's a 2.0 version that's out on the on our website. And so if you have a new teacher or even a teacher who maybe is just not used to providing those individual supports, this is a great resource for them to go to because it's broken down into these different areas. So they'll just turn straight to their particular section. So if I feel like I have a child who's really struggling with organizational skills, I can flip straight to the organizational section, and it's full of strategies that I can implement. And it might even be a seasoned teacher who has utilized these strategies in the past. But let's just say she hasn't had to utilize them in a while, and she or he might have forgotten that that tool was in their toolbox, and it's just kind of a good reminder. You know, I might turn in there and say, oh yeah, I tried that a few years ago with a student and it was really successful, and I had forgotten that I did that. So I had flipped to my Access for All guide and there was that suggestion. So I'm going to try that this year with, you know, student A who is also having these organizational issues. So it's good for seasoned teachers as far as that goes, but it's really good for those first year teachers who maybe don't really understand what types of adaptations they can put in place in the classroom. Okay, this is a piece of documentation that actually shows that differentiation and supports have occurred at the Tier 1 level, especially because you are high school and it's really hard to provide some of these interventions. I mean, for example, your early college, high school, you know, not having an interventionist, so the classroom teacher is ultimately in charge of that intervention. So what is she or he doing at the Tier 1 level to reach those students and to plug those deficit areas and to intervene basically at that Tier 1 level prior to moving on to that supplemental support, which is going to be, you know, smaller groups and additional time in smaller groups, or that intensive support that's really, you know, 30 to 60 minutes every day, that intensive support. So in your team meetings, if your teacher comes to you and if she has said, hey, I have, you know, Kyla that I know needs to be an intervention because she's struggling, she can't do this, she can't do that, then ask them to provide this at the team meeting that will show what she's done in the classroom and specifically where this child is struggling. And then also talk about the degree of supports she's having to put in place. Because, you know, if I'm supporting that student at Tier 1 to the point where that student would have all Fs if I wasn't constantly, you know, reteaching, intervening, giving another copy of this, calling, you know, and if I pull away my supports and that student just falls flat and is just going to be Fs, that's a very high degree of support for the Tier 1 level. So maybe we do need to move that child, you know, to Tier 2 or Tier 3. So that's why I say I'll also consider and have conversation in your meetings about the degree of those supports. All right. At the secondary level, is it academic or is it behavior? Okay. I bet you have students you can think of in your mind right now who are struggling academically because it's really a behavior issue, you know, lack of just lack of completing work, period. You know, what's going on with that student? Why is that student not completing the work? These are things that we really have to have conversation about in those team meetings. So, you know, and talk to those students. I mean, if you're working with junior high and high school students, they are very capable of sitting down with you all and talking to your team and you know, being up front with you and saying, you know, this is where I'm struggling, this is why, or I don't like this, or I do like that. Sometimes it's just simply, I don't like Miss Brantley. That happens, you know. There's nothing we can do about that because, you know, we have to learn to work with who we have to work with. And sometimes we have team teachers or students that, you know, our personalities are just kind of a conflict. So what ideas can we put in place? What intervention or remediation could we put in place to help in that situation, to help those two who maybe just don't have those kinds of personalities that jive? Thinking about, is it a poor working memory situation? Is it ADHD, for example? You know, the Connections of Hattiesburg had an ADHD conference the other day, and they actually said, one of the doctors said that there's conversation in the medical world about renaming ADHD and renaming it something that doesn't include that hyper piece, because, you know, it's not always those students who are acting out, you know, and standing on their head, or, you know, a lot of times it's those students who just are having those internalizing behaviors, who are just quiet, who maybe are struggling, you know, with that processing. They work slowly, they can't keep up with the workload, they feel overwhelmed. All of these are things to consider in your team meetings. All right. So if I'm a classroom teacher and I'm teaching high school and I've got to do tier 2 smaller groups, what can I do in my tier 2 smaller group? I can still utilize things that I utilize at tier 1, but I'm going to tweak them a little bit. I'm going to maybe teach in a more isolated manner, okay? Or I'm going to chunk my lessons more so, or I'm going to give you more frequent interaction with me, more teacher face-to-face interaction with me. You know, I'm going to give you more time than I am some of the other students. Maybe I'm going to do some additional modeling. Maybe I'm going to provide some additional manipulatives. Maybe I'm going to have a team teacher come in, or another math teacher come in and explain the same information and model the same problems, but maybe somehow she just has that magic wow today, you know. It happens. I mean, sometimes maybe I'm not getting the point across, and someone else, you know, kind of from a different way of explaining could hit that. There are so many things that I can do being creative for my tier 2 small groups that really are based on what I'm doing at tier 1. If I'm using graphic organizers in any way, and if the student is struggling with something that I can use those graphic organizers, maybe pull a different graphic organizer, but it does the same thing, okay? Because maybe it's just a particular graphic organizer the student's having trouble with. It has to be aligned with tier 1. So we're not asking tier 2, we're not asking teachers to, you know, create an entirely new lesson plan for tier 2. We're really piggybacking on tier 1, but in a smaller group setting and more frequently and more intensely.
Jada, I have a question there. I'm real big on asking schools to use evidence-based interventions. And so how would we document what you just said and show it as an evidence-based intervention?
So with those levels of evidence, the fourth level of evidence, and I'm going to say it wrong because I haven't looked at it in a few weeks and it's not in front of me, but that potential for evidence or showing evidence, I don't remember the exact words, but it would basically be, you guys have your progress monitor checks, or you have your data on the student to show that they're being successful. So that's something that you would definitely have conversation about in your TST meetings. You know, if it is teacher created interventions, then is this student growing? Are we seeing progress? Because that progress and that progress that student is making, that can be used as evidence there. So yeah, that's a great question, because it's got to be conversation.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I still don't understand, Stephanie, and maybe you understand. I know what you're trying to say. So how would we actually put that in?
Okay, so teachers at tier 1 are still using certain strategies. Like, I don't think you would say lecture in a smaller group. That wouldn't, to me, you know, that wouldn't be you know, but if you're using graphic organizers, that is a strategy, an evidence-based strategy. But you could use graphic organizers in a smaller setting, or with a different focus, those things that were on the slide before. So the strategy at tier 1 is supposed to be evidence-based as well. So yes, thank you for going back to that slide.
This one?
Yes.
Okay.
So if you're using graphic organizers, whole group in your classroom, then you could use them the same thing, but use it in a smaller, isolated manner. So that would be, it would be the same strategy, but in a small group. For chunking, I know that Ms. Farrell has been documenting chunking as a part of the intervention just recently, because I was helping her enter some interventions. And so there you go, Ms. Farrell, you have been validated. You can use, chunking. Your chunking or micro teaching, those are evidence-based strategies. And then, of course, the frequency is always, tier 2 is just by design is going to be more frequent than tier 1. I hope that helped. Let's see.
Yes, and I know that, you mentioned also in the request, let's talk about intervention versus remediation some. So at the secondary level, sometimes it is more gray as far as something between a remediation and an intervention, okay? So straight up intervention is going to be more of a program per se, okay? But at the secondary level, sometimes my strategies are a little more short term than an everyday intervention program, for example. So you're kind of riding that line sometimes between remediation and intervention. And that might be biology, for example, because I can perform a straight up intervention in reading. I could come into a high school and do, structured systematic literacy myself with most any level student, and it's intervention, straightforward reading, instruction, and intervention. But when it's something like a biology class, sometimes it kind of sits in the middle of that difference in remediation and intervention. So something like chunking, we may not think of it necessarily as systematic explicit intervention, but I'm taking that remediation piece of chunking and I'm presenting it to that student systematically and explicitly, so that kind of makes it roll over more into being an intervention. And truthfully, like with intervention being so, it's supposed to be explicit, okay? So explicit teaching means I leave no guessing out there for that student. I am going to be straightforward, as down as I need to be in the dirt, telling this student what they need to know. This is what you need to know. This is how you do it. There's really not a lot of student discovery, for example, because I'm really getting down there and telling you, this is what we got to know. Okay, you can use your computer programs, like you said that you guys have that iReady. Make sure that if you do utilize any computer program like ClassWorks is computer-based, right? Utilize your computer program, but also have that teacher-led face-to-face, because we're having a problem, I think, nationwide, personally. That's just my personal opinion, with putting a computer in front of a child and saying, this is intervention time. Well, that computer program is not a teacher. It's not teacher-led face-to-face. A computer program, it might introduce new skills to a student, okay? And it might provide practice for that student. And it can do some progress monitoring. I can get some great information from some of that computer time. But it's not the same as me sitting down face-to-face and interacting with that child. Even if it's simply pulling those reports and, what is it that I need to go over with you that you maybe have struggled with on the computer program. But have that face-to-face, know that student, know what's going on. I know when I was in the classroom, my kids worked on Lexia, and I loved Lexia because it was really aligned to my dyslexia therapy too. But there were times I would simply, for intervention time, pull my chair over to the computer while that child was doing Lexia, and I wasn't giving the child feedback but I was taking notes about, what I saw that the student was successful at, where they were struggling a little bit, and then I utilized that for the next time that we met together. Okay. And making sure we're giving feedback, frequent feedback is definitely something that's important for intervention students. So they're understanding if they're making progress or where we're not making progress, that we need to change some things, kind of going back to that drawing board. What do we need to do that's different if we need to change intervention? All right. Do you guys have your counselors are handling the behavior intervention piece?
Our counselors and admins handle our tier 2 behavior.
Okay. All right, great. And so you make sure that like you guys are in constant collaboration, because again, that's hand in hand right there, what's going on with those students. Okay, okay, let's read this scenario, and then I want you in just a minute, once you've read the scenario, let's kind of talk about, what do you think? Is this a situation where this child needs to be in intervention, or could this child just get some remediation? Okay, so if you guys were sitting together as a team and you were discussing Melissa, do you think that she needs to be put in a tier 2 intervention, or do you think this is something that could be remediated at the tier 1 level? And what would you suggest to the classroom teacher?
You might need to take off mute so you can just freely discuss.
I would say some remediation.
Yes, a
Because
lot of people, our internet's down.
I would definitely say some remediation rather than putting her into an intervention tier 2 program.
So what do you think that really we need to work on as far as shoring up some of these areas where she's struggling with remediation?
I think teaching her how to, since she's having her difficulties are transitioning from class to class, and too many concepts at one time. So probably figuring out a strategy to help her organize herself a little bit better. It sounds like organization is the problem, or at least one of the problems.
I totally agree. And then it says that switching classes makes it difficult for her to get the help that she needs. Well, the help that she needs is probably there somewhere, but teaching her also where to go to get the help, or where to carve out that time to get the help. Kids don't want to come to school early. Y'all, my 9th grader this morning was supposed to be at 0 o'clock. We moved him to a higher math class because he definitely was in a class where he knew way too much to be sitting in that math class. However, now this math class is 4 chapters ahead. So he needs to go early in the mornings to get that information that he has missed. Do kids ever jump up first thing in the morning and go, oh, let me go to school early? No, they don't. So teaching her, we've got to work out a plan, we've got to work out a system so that you can go to get that extra help that you need, or that assistance that you need. Do you guys have carved out time during the day? Do you have a 0 block or an intervention block or anything?
I do at my school. we have a intervention block that everybody drops everything and does intervention or remediation at that time.
Right. Good. Okay.
We
So
do
that,
not.
okay. So in that case, you really are kind of at the mercy of, okay, can we come in here a little bit early? Can we stay a little bit late? Maybe, you know, I don't know. Some schools still do a break time. Not many schools do that though. But if there's some time that you can try to be creative to carve out that time so that you can provide that additional support, maybe it is going to be through like a Teams call or a Zoom call, which y'all know, that is one thing that I think is positive about, you know, where we are now, is that I can think of so many students that after I got to my house in the afternoon and had my Diet Coke and took off my shoes and had like a, whew, school day's over. You know, I can think of several students that could have called in real quick and said, Miss Brantley, I'm struggling with this. What do you want me to do? I mean, I could have had my computer sitting on the counter while I'm chopping up potatoes or something, you know, and kind of giving a little bit of direction there. Now, that being said, I definitely don't want anybody to, you know, provide support all in the afternoon so that you're not taking care of yourself and your family. But where can you be creative to kind of carve out, you know, those supports for kids? All right. Make sure that with our tier 2 students that we are collecting some type of progress monitor. It can be, again, it could be a formative assessment in the classroom. So it could actually be a classroom assessment that is a formative assessment, and maybe I'm taking several formative assessments and graphing those out to kind of show if what I'm intervening with is transferring over to that grade level instruction and assessment area. All right, I know you said you're familiar with the packet, so we'll zoom on past this part right here. Matt, are you back on yet? I think Matt lost his internet a minute ago.
Yes, I'm back
Okay.
on.
So we talked a little bit, Matt, about scheduling just a minute ago while you were off, but you want to go ahead and go over some of these options. And this is something too, because I know that one person spoke up and said that they did not have a built-in intervention time. So these are definitely things that, you know, you need to discuss with your admin. Maybe, you know, before next semester, maybe you could make a change if you need to kind of build in a little bit of time. But Matt, I'm going to go ahead and let you take it away now.
Sure, awesome. Yeah, I did hear part of the conversation about one school having a 0 block. And as a previous middle school administrator, that's exactly what we did. We found that most of the students who needed additional supports arrived at school before the first a 0 period, so to speak, where those students went directly to their intervention class and were provided supports during that time. A few years later, we actually did a modified lunch schedule. We know that most students use lunch as a social period, a social time. So we modified our lunch schedule a bit, kind of shortened the lunch period, extended that block for us. It was a longer period of time, and we also provided interventions during that time. So flexibility is the key. Whether you are doing, you're going to do something before school or to incorporate a 0 block, a 0 period, developing an A-B schedule where you may be seeing students only several days of the week. Flexibility is just, you know, critical for secondary. And then you may already have built into your schedule a particular class like learning strategies or something like that, or study hall, where you can provide some interventions during that time. As you all know, secondary is a different animal. So it requires out of the box thinking and like I said, flexibility to make this process work. And again, like Jada said, you have to have those conversations with your administrators so that they can be aware that, this is state policy. We have to get the work done, and we need to look at, possible ways to incorporate this time during our schedules. Okay. So I looked in the chat and I saw where there were several comments about lists, intervention lists. Well, we do have a list of evidence-based interventions, both for academic and behavior. This is not the end-all be-all list, but it's just a good list of state-approved behavior in academic interventions. And when I say state-approved, Jada, along with other colleagues in the office and some educators across the state, we all work together go through several interventions. We did what's called an RFQ, request for qualifications. We actually looked at the interventions that were sent to us, and Jada can attest to it. It's a long process. I mean, some of the documents were at least 500 pages. And so it was a lengthy process, and we went through that and selected what we felt were some good quality interventions that districts and states can use when they're making a selection for use. So, and this is not the end all be all. You may know of something different, but they are here for you to look through. And we have identified those that are secondary for secondary use. So
Can
you
you
have a
direct
copy of that as well.
on that MDE page?
I'm sorry, if you can repeat that.
Can you direct us where exactly to find that on the MDE
Sure.
website?
If this is the easiest way to manipulate the MDE's website, if you go to the search bar and type in intervention services, it'll take you directly to our webpage. And on that webpage, you will have the approved academic and behavior interventions listed there. You will also find the MTSS guidance document, any other resources that you would need, including other professional developments that we've done. And somebody just dropped it in the link in the chat. I appreciate that. That'll take you directly to it. And what we tell districts is that you're not obligated to use those specific interventions. However, I apologize. However, we have made them available for you for use. Okay, we'll take a look at Tier 3 interventions. Jada, you want me to continue on with that, or you want to take that up, or?
I'll go ahead because I think we've discussed a lot of what we're about to go through the slides for. So,
Okay.
All righty. We talked about this. We talked about, I mentioned the frequency as far as time requirements, for Tier 3. You do need to make sure that you are inviting parents to the meetings regarding Tier 3 students. They do not have to come to every set of meetings, but maybe every other set of meetings. Try to have a schedule as far as how often you have your meetings. 4 to 5 weeks, for example, is usually what we suggest. I had the district I was in yesterday, they said that they meet every 2 weeks on high school students because they were discussing attendance. And I thought this was interesting. They were discussing how attendance is problematic. And they said, if we wait until 4 or 5 weeks to check the attendance, then we're reacting to all of the absences. And I thought, that's true. And, not to add something else to someone's plate, but maybe some kind of quick check on attendance at like a 2-week period, so that we could put some kind of attendance plan in place on the front end. But I thought that was just interesting information to share. And then with Tier 3, we are progress monitoring every week, okay? Okay, again, if you do not have a program that has a script or is already, something that's in place as far as the strategies and activities, then you are relying on your teacher created. And again, that evidence is going to be if that student is growing, in accordance to what you're providing for that intervention. So make sure that you're really talking about, what am I doing for intervention, and is this rolling over into his or her classroom performance? Is the student growing? Am I having evidence here that I can show you guys at the team meeting that the student is growing? Do I have my proof? Okay. So know that by the time we put a child in Tier 3 in high school, that's a pretty serious situation, because here we are, we've gotten all these years, and we're still struggling at that intense level. So, if I'm a high school teacher, I'm just going to tell you, I'm going to do everything I can as a middle school or a high school teacher to intervene at that Tier 2 level and see if I can shore up those deficits at Tier 2. But yes, I'm going to have a few students now and again that are going to be those that are going to have that intensive instruction for academics. So I'm going to have to try to figure out how to carve out that time, or we as a team are going to have to figure out who is going to provide that intensive instruction if I don't have an interventionist, for example. If I have an interventionist, then of course that's where that intensive instruction will come from. Students can graduate as students who are on Tier 3, but at the high school level, when I have students who are Tier 3 who have been Tier 3 on and off since kindergarten, we as a team really need to have some conversation about child find. Is there something going on here that we really need to do a study, and we really need to get additional data? We can't just keep saying, oh, we're providing that Tier 3, he or she is okay. We have to really dig deep on that and say, what could be going on. Now, of course, there are those situations where you're going to have kids who move in from other districts, and you're going to say to yourself, oh, wow, this kid was not on Tier 3 at his previous district, but, according to us and according to our team, we're saying, ooh, this is a red light emergency situation. If he or she has those multiple repetitions, or they're, reading several grade levels behind, or it may be a behavior issue, but y'all know what I'm talking about. We've all got those students who we have said, where did he come from and what was going on? So those are those red light situations. I know you said that your counselors are handling that behavior for you, so they are creating those functional behavioral administering those functional behavioral assessments so that they can implement those behavior intervention plans. I'm not going to go over all this information with you.
Well, if they're Tier 2, they don't have behavior intervention plans per se.
Right. So if it's Tier 2, they're just doing more of check-in, check-out, maybe a student contract. So yes, since we're going over the Tier 3 information now, but so that this FBA and BIP is that Tier 3 information. All right. This is also a document that is available on the QR code. It's just a simple teacher checklist to show the teacher what she can bring to the team meeting, because I know sometimes teachers, they've got 5,000 things going, plates spinning in the air, and they may forget, you know, what is it that I need to take to this team meeting, especially a first year teacher or a new teacher who hasn't been in multiple tier meetings through the years, but they can bring these pieces of data to the meeting to share with the team so you guys can analyze the entire student. Because remember, we are analyzing the entire student. We are looking at everything that we can look at about that student, not just one benchmark, not just the fact that the student has multiple absences, if that's something that's happening, but everything. How many times have we talked to the parents? How many times have we conferenced with the student? You know, it's almost like being an interventionist. I mean, because I'm a former school interventionist. It's almost like you're a person of everything, you know? And even though you guys who are on here who are academic interventionists, you're not even just an academic interventionist. To tell you the truth, you're also supporting that behavior. You're also supporting those classroom teachers. You're still teacher, academic interventionist, behavior interventionist. Sometimes you're helping out with assistant administrator. You know, you are wearing so many hats as interventionist. And it's a good thing though, because you're getting to know those students. You're knowing the entire student. Be in touch with your MSIS clerk. Know your MSIS clerk. Be his or her friend. Have that that relationship so that you can ask for information that you need to know. Maybe you have students who move out and you have their tier information and no one ever lets you know where they went, or you don't know, you know, no one has requested that information. So here again, as interventionist, you're like the PI, you're the private investigator. You're like, okay, where did they enroll? What can I do to get this information to them or to that building? Because just because they left me doesn't mean I'm not invested in helping that student to be successful, to be college or career ready, to graduate, to meet those early warning system goals. All right, let's see. We've already covered bullet 1. We just talked about that. We've talked about everything. Let's just go to the last bullet. Who provides intervention supports to your dyslexic students? And there's no wrong answer.
So I'll answer. From what I know, if anyone has something different, they can chime in. But we do not have a dyslexia therapy program in our district. We have a pilot program that is implemented in some of our schools, but nothing really at the secondary level. However, we will be engaged in that training that is required for all levels of the dyslexia awareness training. We do have a dyslexia therapist that serves as our reading specialist for the district. So we are coming along in that area.
Okay. And there are a good number of districts who don't have therapists. There's some districts out there who are looking for therapists, but there aren't therapists out there for them to hire right now. So being aware, understanding how to provide intervention towards those deficit areas. So, utilize the dyslexia, the diagnosis that you would be provided, utilize that testing, compare it to other data that you have too, and figure out how to intervene with students. I know at the secondary level, I did have some students I provided therapy to. A lot of my students at the secondary level were those who needed just some adaptations. Some of those things that are in that Access for All 2.0 guide needed accommodations, needed additional time as one of their adaptations. So, those are things that you guys, again, can discuss. But what about your SPED students? Who provides intervention for SPED students? And there's no right or wrong answer.
At our school, they all have a learning strategies class. So those teachers, help with any individualized instruction they need.
Okay. So it can be a learning strategies teacher, a regular ed teacher. It can be a special education teacher. It can be the dyslexia therapist. basically the person who is going to provide intervention is going to be the person who is most capable of providing the appropriate intervention, who is qualified to provide the most appropriate intervention for a student. So with MTSS, we're not looking at who's labeled this and who's labeled that and who's going to fall under, you know, this column and this column and this person. It is, who do we have in our building, or who do we have access to who can serve this student and intervene with this student to help the student to be successful, because MTSS is general ed. So we're helping all of our students. Okay, this is just part of that documentation you guys are aware of. We won't do the scenarios. I've talked about child find. In your MET meeting, who attends MET meetings? Tell me that. If somebody calls a MET meeting, who attends MET meetings?
Is MET
That
the
would
same
be-
thing as TST?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
I guess, can you tell me what the acronym MET stands for?
Multi-disciplinary education team. I think I said that correctly. It's not right in front of me. But it's going to be similar to your TST team, but you're going to have some additional representation at the meeting. So basically what I was trying to kind of get to is you're going to have a representative from special education available at that meeting to look at intervention services, what's occurred for the student, you know, what supports you guys have put in place. And, you know, typically you're going to have data to look at from intervention. You're going to have intervention data to look at and to consider to decide if you need to send a student on for that comprehensive evaluation. But there's going to be students who you might not have data on. So what are some examples when you might have a MET meeting that was called and you might be sitting there and you don't have, you know, you have your classroom samples, work samples, and maybe your most current grades or frequent, most current grades, but you don't have any like historical data or, you know, intervention information. What kinds of situations would that be?
Well, whenever
Such as a
students are getting
parent
504
request.
plans,
Sorry, go ahead.
A parent request.
Okay, very true. It could be a parent request because, you know, sometimes a parent will call and say, I want my child to receive special education services, and it's simply a tier 1 student. It could be a child who has moved in from another district who doesn't have any intervention data. But there are situations where, believe it or not, you might sit in a MET meeting and you might have a student who does not have intervention data, who maybe, you know, you didn't realize the scope of everything that was going on with the student. And once the parent tells you, hey, you know, I'm providing this at home, we're doing this outside, I'm paying this person. I hear this with dyslexia sometimes. That's what comes to my mind. But, you know, I'm paying the dyslexia therapist because the district doesn't have a therapist, and we're seeing the therapist 5 days a week, and we're taking ADHD medicine, and I'm spending 10 hours at night doing homework with my kid, you know. And so all of those things that are happening, we're, you know, are helping to resolve some of the issues. So in the school setting, in the classroom, we're like, oh, this child's moving and shaking, you know, he's got C averages. I mean, he's good, you know. But then when the parent sits down and says, look at what I'm having to do, or, you know, that might be a situation where you say, well, you know, maybe we do need to consider an evaluation, or, you know, let's go ahead and put this child in tier 3. Let's see what's going on, you know. So again, team decisions, team meetings. And one thing I do want to say, because you are secondary, I don't want you to second guess yourselves about things, because it's easy to second guess ourselves, okay? It's easy to sit there and say, well, should I do this with this student? Should I do this with this student? That's why you're making team decisions, okay? You're making those team decisions, and majority is going to kind of, I don't want to say majority rules, but that is what it is. You know, when you're making those team decisions, what the majority says is kind of what's going to be put in place, what's going to move forward. So you don't have to carry that weight on your shoulders of being the one person who made this life-changing decision for intervention for a student, you know. And if the intervention is not successful, y'all, if you go to that table for the next TST meeting and, you know, the biology teacher was intervening with, you know, content area reading skills such as, utilizing those parts of the text that the child needed to really get familiar with utilizing, and you say, this isn't working, this child's not making progress, change it, change the intervention. There's just, you make those decisions based on your data, your current data for the betterment of your students, and know that you're helping, you're making great decisions. But we know it is more challenging at the secondary level. By the time they've gotten there, we understand. All right.
And Jada, I just wanted to clarify for everyone on the call. When you're saying MET, we call that in our district DMET, and it stands for District Multidisciplinary Evaluation Team. We just throw that D in the front of it. So that might be why everyone was a little confused.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. And I think I said educational team. I'm glad you said that. I got to tell y'all, I am not running on all cylinders. One of my kids left yesterday for basic training. So night before last, I stayed up till 2 till he finally called to tell me that he got there. And of course, I don't hear from him yesterday. But then I get a message that says, if someone calls and says your child is in prison in Texas and wants money, do not believe the call. So apparently, some parent information was hacked somewhere. And so parents are getting calls. And I just thought, thank goodness I didn't get that call. But anyway, it's just been a stressful couple of days. All right, so we're talking about What Works Clearinghouse. I know that Ms. Wilson said that she's real big on evidence-based. Matt, can you go over this? What these slides on What Works Clearinghouse?
Absolutely. If you're not familiar with What Works Clearinghouse, it's just like a database of various interventions or support skills, activities, resources that districts can use, and it provides you with the documented evidence that proves that that particular skill resource is effective. So if you go to this link, https://ised.gov, it'll take you directly to What Works Clearinghouse. And again, the easiest thing to do that looking for resources or interventions and on vocabulary, decoding, or whatever, you'll be able to find it here, and it'll give you the evidence and some additional resources to use. So it'll give you, this is kind of far away and my glasses are not near me, but it lets you know whether or not it has some significant impact on student achievement. So it gives you some information across there. It gives you a rating on how effective that particular skill is. And then if you can click on down, and it will give you some additional resources for that particular skill or item that you're looking at. And then what I like is that in some instances, it gives you word for word, almost like a script, so to speak, of the particular intervention or skill. On the teacher can just easily incorporate it in the lesson or during the intervention time. And again, like I said, I mean, it has a plethora of additional resources that you can use, and it's very user friendly. So if you're not familiar with it, I suggest that you just get in there and just start, manipulating the website. And again, if you don't have a particular intervention that you're using, it will give you some good, quick information that you can just easily begin to incorporate in your processes.
And do you guys want, Miss Wilson, do you want to, you want me to just skip through these? It's just a couple of slides about SEL. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. The counselors and teachers probably familiar with the new SEL standards.
You could hit the highlights.
Okay. So, you know, a minute ago, whenever I said you wear so many hats as an interventionist and you're really working with the entire student, well, these new SEL standards really speak to you as an interventionist too, because, you know, as you're working with your students on those academic areas, you're also working on these 5 domains that we have incorporated as our SEL standards. You're working on self-management, self-awareness, helping these kids in responsible decision making, relationship skills, and social awareness. So our state standards are broken into those 5 domains. So those are the ones that I just named off. And really, we're teaching these standards embedded in everything that we're doing, honestly. So it's not something that we have to do in addition, but we're just making sure that we are covering these as we're teaching. And as good teachers, again, we are. So they're set up in grade bands. So you guys are middle school and high school. So you would focus more so on that 6-8 band and that 9-12 band. Just making sure that students have mastered those by the time that they transition out of like the 6-8 band into 9-12. I already hit this high point too. You got to take care of yourself too, to make sure that you're at your best to be able to serve your students the best, you know. So make sure that you're taking care of yourself too. All right, that's really what we have for the day. Any specific questions that you still have regarding secondary?
Okay,
I
have.
do.
Okay, I'll let somebody else go first. Go ahead.
I have a question. In the secondary, well, in the high school teaching environment, we can't just say everything is behavior if they're not getting biology. But the student can read and they can memorize vocabulary, but they need subject area intensive, not just remediation, in order to learn all these skills for the state test. And I'm just still not seeing, you know, a high school level intervention that MDE has talked about. We see reading interventions, behavior interventions, but nothing that's focused on core subject areas.
So there are not a plethora of interventions out there that are core subject area based interventions. We do have some on our approved intervention list that that do include some of those subject areas. I know Study Island, for example, includes some of those core subject areas. So it might be a computer program in which you look into, and you can, you know, the student can have some additional practice test taking, or actually just question answer practice time on those specific biology skills. But there is not a tier 3 biology, just straightforward intervention that they're, such as the kind that they have out there for reading and mathematics. So that's why it's got to be just a teacher-led intervention.
And we do have USA test prep that could be used for that.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? All right. I have a couple. Okay. So, are interventions only required for state tested courses and prerequisites?
No, intervention is required for any area in which that student is struggling. I mean, if that student is struggling in band, we need to have a meeting and we need to decide what's going on. Why are we struggling in band? You know, is there anything that we can put in place to help with that student who is struggling in band? So it's not just subject area tested subjects, state tested.
And then how many integrity checks should be done for a tier 2 and for a tier 3 intervention?
Usually, every 4 weeks, you should conduct an integrity check. So, I mean, I would just say, let's do 4 weeks for tier 2 and tier 3. There's really not a set number. It's kind of what you think you need to do. And you know, you may have to do additional integrity checks in some situations where you're not in other situations, you know. You might do 1 or 2 on a teacher in a year because you know she's rocking and rolling and she's really, you know, carrying out those groups. And then there may be somewhere you need to go in at some additional times because, you know, that teacher might need a little more support and a little more professional development, or, you know, some additional resources. So you kind of just.
I think the documentation packet says at least 2 per cycle.
Yes.
Is it? Right. And then this is more of a general question, not just secondary, but just in my mind, I'm trying to wrap my mind around if we have a student who has an IEP for speech language only, and we need to provide additional interventions. Do we document that on the MTSS documentation, or is that documented in the IEP?
I would document that in the MTSS documentation because the IEP, as I understand, you know, the IEP has the goals and it has the path where you can actually, you know, discuss what's occurring to help a child to meet the goals. But I think that additional support would be more of an MTSS documentation piece, because, you know, that would be, you would consider that documentation to see, you know, do we need to kind of go back to the drawing board and add some additional testing pieces to that speech language piece, you know?
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay, good.
And it's a good question because I had a lot of students who were my students who had, you know, ended up with dyslexia diagnosis in elementary, particularly, you know, who, which it started out and we had identified, you know, there was a speech language issue, and then we found out it was a little more than that, you know.
Okay. And then my last question, and there might be others after, well, no, I have 2 more. Okay, going back to the, you know, scheduling and going back to the guidance document. So tier 2 is 20 to 30 minutes, 3 to 5 days a week. Tier 3 is 30 to 60 minutes daily. And this, I assume, applies to high school and junior high and elementary alike. Is that correct?
So that, yes, that's what we say is best practice. However, we know the intervention office, we know sometimes we have to shave some minutes off at the middle school or high school level. You know, we don't want to jump in there saying, well, you know, I'm not going to provide 60 minutes. I'm only going to provide 30 minutes just because that's what I'm going to provide. However, when you look at all of your information, you look at your scheduling, you may say, look, all we can do because of scheduling is 30 minutes, you know? I mean, and I got to tell you, if there's a situation where there's a child who, you know, gets off the bus later than other kids and that kid's only going to get 25 minutes for tier 3, it happens, you know, we know. So like you would just document that situation and say, look, this is a tier 3 student. He's only getting 25 of tier 3 every day because of the, you know, and explain it. And that way, if we ever come out, you know, we see there, you had to make these decisions for reasons, you know.
Okay, that was going to be my next question. So if we get audited, heaven forbid, if we get audited, what would the auditors be expecting to see?
Well, that would be us. And so since we love everybody and we love y'all, I mean, we would say that's acceptable as long as you have your documentation and there is factual evidence that supports this is why we had to do this, you know.
Right.
It's really just going to be again, you know, and it's kind of an integrity call with you guys, you know. We just did what we had to do for this particular student or this group of students. Same if I got a question the other day, and this kind of piggybacks off of what you said, but there was one student who was going to be removed from a group for scheduling reasons and receive the same intervention, but at a different time of the day or something because of scheduling. And, you know, they felt like that was not giving that child the same intervention opportunities, I think, and maybe he was going to have minutes shaved because they moved him by himself, and I just said, write it down, document it. Why did you have to move the kid from a group? And it was a behavior issue in the group. So, he's not going to learn anything in that group. So you're moving him out and you're telling me that he's only going to get 23 minutes of tier 3 every day because you had to create another whole group just for him. Well, he wasn't going to get anything in that group anyway. So, why
Yes.
would we keep him in there just to get the 30 minutes,
Right. And I guess my mind goes then, because I serve on DMET, the MET, and so then I'm thinking, well, if the student did come through for child find, we might have a question, well, did he get enough intervention? If they're not doing, we might say, well, that's why we're not going to test, because we don't know if the child could have done better if he had more intervention. But so there are just a lot of things to think about in that, for the scheduling.
Right. And you just made a perfect point. I mean, you guys at your district level, you might say, let's go back to the drawing board because we've got to figure out how to get some additional intervention times because, he might be able to show that progress if we could get that time in.
Mm-hmm. And then my last question, unless anyone else has any other questions, is do you have in your mind any model school districts in the state that are doing a really good job at secondary that we might could tap into their expertise?
That's a great question. And I have been asked that question recently by another district. And I know that the interventionist that is at, and this is not a model district by any means, this is just one that I've seen do a great job. Northwest Rankin Middle School in Rankin County, one of the interventionists there used to be at Florence Middle School in Rankin County, and she and her administrator have now moved to different schools, but that particular interventionist is at Northwest Rankin Middle School, and she does a great job. She has it set up so that she pulls her students who are tier 3 out of their learning strategies class. So they're receiving tier 2 in their learning strategies class. And if they are a student who they have identified as tier 3, they'll be pulled out of that strategies class to receive that one-on-one with her, and she makes it work. And she does a good job of knowing her kids and the scheduling and everything. So it's Felicia Thomas.
Okay. All right.
And then another, and I was also going to tell you, her former administrator who was with her until this year is at Northwest Rankin High School now, and that's Jessica Hodges. And so Jessica, she'd probably be happy to talk to you about, the practices they had in place and how they implemented. Real sweet.
Okay. And again, I heard a key word in that you said their learning strategies class. So I think scheduling is key at the secondary level. I think that, the administration needs to be involved in making that time in the schedule, having learning strategies classes or having an environment for that to take place.
Right. And I think that it's really important to consider who is teaching that learning strategies class. Are they trained?
Mm-hmm.
Are they, proficient in say math and reading? If you've got students in there who are math and reading, maybe you have 2 different strategies classes and you've broken them down, as far as that goes. But it's got to be someone who knows how to intervene, and not just, because I've seen this too, a classroom teacher who says, oh, I need a change. I think I want to do learning strategies, and they're really not the best fit to serve, and meet those needs. Definitely good considerations. And then I've also seen, learning strategies classes would be used for computer programs, but then, go back to what we said earlier, where it's not just a computer program. They can definitely do some practice or some learning on the computer program, but we can't just say this is a computer class, for learning strategies.
Mm-hmm.
And again, one last thing I'm gonna say about that. Be careful that it doesn't become a study hall, because we see that too. Just talked to a district the other day that said, I feel like I have a swinging door of kids who are just behind on homework or didn't finish this or didn't finish that. And so it can't be just a safety net for, a study hall situation. Now,
Right.
I know Felicia will tell you she's had kids that did that before, but she would say, we're going to do tier 3. And I'll tell you what, she would say, the last 10 minutes of tier 3, I'll look at your homework. If you're having trouble on it, if you couldn't finish it, but she says, but these first few minutes of tier 3, from X to X, tier 3, straightforward. And then I'll give you a few minutes. And that also kind of helped her with the student buy-in, because they're more willing to participate and be engaged if they know we are going to get to the point where you're going to assist me with that thing that's really burning in my mind,
Right. Mhm. Okay. Anyone else have questions?
Yes, this is Martha Aber. I'm on Miss Farrell's phone. Can you repeat the minutes required for high school for tier 2 and tier 3 per week?
Okay, so tier 2, 20 to 30 minutes every other day of small group for high school. So that would be, say, 20 minutes carved out of, I don't mean carved out and away from, but it could be when we are conducting, we've got our whole class, but then we have like a certain group of students who are sitting in the same vicinity in the classroom. So maybe 20 minutes of that time, I'm working on those tier 2 strategies. Right. So we say 20 to 30 every other day is best practice. But again, let's say that, are you guys block or are you period?
Block.
So you do have what, 90 minutes?
Let me correct that. We have 92 minutes per class.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not being disrespectful, but I don't think that we can do 20 to 30 minutes every other day.
Okay.
And how much tier 3? You were saying 30 to 60 daily for tier 3?
Yes. So
daily?
Tier 3 is 30 to 60 daily. So that is one reason that you guys might have some in-depth conversation with administrators about really looking at having interventionists to complete that tier 3 intervention, or having that scheduled 30-minute intervention period or block. Some people call it like Tiger Time or Eagle's Nest or something, in which everybody goes to intervention, and that would be when that 30 minutes of intervention occurred. Lots of conversation to be had about how to best serve your kids. And so that goes back to the flexibility. So, I mean, I know I've been in the classroom for many years. You can't squeeze minutes out of a turnip, so you've got to figure out with what we've got, how can we best serve them? So that's why we say 30 to 60 for tier 3 every day is what we say is best practice. But you guys have to meet as teams and figure out what is feasible. What can you do?
So I lost my train of thought. So if a child is having trouble in math and English, he's tier 3. He's going to be removed from an elective every single day for math and ELA? Or is he removed from the math and ELA classes on a daily basis?
He would not be removed from the tier 1 classes, no. So in some situations, it is a decision that is made to remove a student from an elective, unfortunately. That's also where we get, understand, let's be more flexible, because if I have a child who, say, goes to choir for an elective, and choir is why that child gets up in the morning and comes to school, and that's where she really, she shines in that class, and I'm coming and getting her every day and she's missing choir, that's not a good situation either. So that's where your team will say, well, let's be flexible. Maybe we can't get that 30 minutes in for tier 3. Maybe we'll do 20 minutes of tier 3, and then let her report back to her choir room and, participate in choir, because that is her motivation. We want her to shine at what she shines at. I mean, she may be a famous musician one day, so those again are team decisions for you all to discuss.
Well, I was going to add too, on the high school level, even taking you out of an elective is not an option, because in most cases, those electives are needed for that child to graduate.
Which is why I also have a conversation about that learning strategies. Can it be a credit bearing class for an elective? Do you have curriculum in place, or is it going to meet those requirements? So definitely some conversation.
And so I like the learning strategies, for the gen ed kids who would need that tier 2 and tier 3 instruction. But so can you just help me clarify? So like we have students who move in and out of the tier system, frequently. So it's difficult to say, okay, well, let's put you in learning strategies for this whole semester. And really maybe you only need remediation on 1 or 2 skills. And so you're where you need to be in 4 weeks, but then you're stuck in this class for a whole semester.
It happens, unfortunately. Not a perfect world. So again, that's kind of one of those, let's really look at that data and decide who is going to benefit from that learning strategy situation. If I have a kid who is his threshold between 1 and 2, and that kid doesn't need that learning strategies class, and the team feels like it's not going to be beneficial, then we might say, okay, well, who's the tier 1 teacher that can support this child the best, that can, differentiate and, provide some of that instruction that better fits that child's needs to kind of shore up those deficit areas. A lot of conversation.
So if
Ms.
if they have deficits in math and ELA as a tier 3 student, are they supposed to be removed 30 to 60 minutes per day for math and 30 to 60 minutes per day for ELA?
Oh, I'm sorry. And you had that second part to that question. I totally did not answer. I would not do that in a situation with a student. What I would do is suggest to the team, where is he struggling the most? Where are we going to get the biggest bang for our buck first? Let's focus on, maybe reading deficits first, or should we focus on math deficits first? Or is this a student, for example, who maybe we're going to label him as tier 3 for math and for reading or English, but because it's 2 subject areas, he has an altered plan that we're going to document. And so maybe he's going to do English or reading every other day and math every other day, because he is struggling in both areas. So there's not exactly like a magic bullet fix. It's kind of like you take each of your students and you kind of evaluate what's best for this child,
Well, if you've said several times that this is something we would discuss with the administration, well, what does MDE require? I mean, when it gets down to brass tacks, what would they require, and would they be willing to accept what administration decides?
Yes, it boils down to local control. So
Comes down to what?
It boils down to local control, as far as the administrator has that last, they're going to decide what to do with the schedule. And we respect that. I mean, we can't tell him or her how he or she must, create their schedule. So, I mean, I hope that the administrator is going to see the importance of providing this intervention time. And I hope that, it's everyone gets on board situation, but we're not going to come ding you because of the way that the schedule is set up. We do have standards that can be monitored that says you must have an MTSS process in place. We do have that state board policy that says that you must intervene with all students for behavior and academic, but it is not in policy the number of minutes. So I say, this is what we suggest for best practice, because this is the minutes that is in research that, the evidence shows these are the minutes that give you the best outcome for students. But it's, again, your local decision at your buildings or your district.
And I have a question that made me think of, if we are doing fewer minutes than is recommended, do we still progress monitor once a week for tier 3 and once every other week for tier 2? I've had that question from one of our junior highs. They say, well, the student's not getting the full complement of intervention during that time, so we're not going to see the progress during a week's time. So, so talk about that.
Well, for tier 3, I would say if we don't feel like we're really getting enough exposure to that intervention within a week, I would say do it every other week. Yeah, because when I was providing dyslexia therapy as a tier 3, and I traveled from school to school, and there were students that I had to see every other day, and so I put them on an every other week schedule, and that would be acceptable to us.
Thank you.
Now, if a child is, let's say, tier 2 or tier 3, and he's not failing a class, does he need to be remediated?
I would definitely, if a student's failing, I would definitely bring them forward to the TST to discuss. That's a team decision as well.
If he's not failing.
Oh, not failing? Well, you have to look at your data. You have to look at, is he or she struggling in any area? There are students who are struggling with reading skills who do need some intervention in reading, for example, but they may not be failing. They may be making C's and D's and chugging right along, but they really do need some intensive intervention in some higher level reading skills to help them be successful in life, period, because they're going to leave your buildings, and move on to the college level. So do I have a student who's a C or D student who maybe, is struggling in a subject area, who needs some additional support to be more successful in that area? So that also is a question to consider, along with how many kids do you have that you've identified, right? So if I have a lower number of tier 2 or tier 3 students, then yes, I'm going to look at some of these other students who maybe have some deficits, but they're not quite as significant deficits, But now if you have an astronomical number right now, or you feel like of, your tier 2 or tier 3 that you're serving, you've got to look at, who do I need to serve? Who has the most need right now?
Okay. Also, and I don't mean to be hogging these questions here, but take, for instance, math. A child is not doing well in algebra. Now, this is high school, so he needs to be working on algebra, in my opinion. If he does not know his math facts, we don't have time to work with math facts, not to mention he has a calculator. So what is the intervention there? To me, if he's having problems with equations, he should be helped with equations so he can pass these tests and learn.
Right. So that's why you're using your data to decide where the deficit area is. So what does your algebra data say? What does your algebra data show that he or she really needs support in, specifically in that algebra class? So see, that could be a tier 2 situation where I'm still teaching algebra skills and strategies, but I'm chunking them more, or I'm doing more modeling for a student, or I'm giving the student additional practice. I've seen a lot of students struggle in algebra who are ADHD or who are dyslexic, who have processing disorders, and it's that multi-step piece in algebra that really makes them struggle, or that the time that it takes on solving those algebraic equations. So really you have to get down to the nitty-gritty of why is he or she struggling?
Back to the, and let me write this down. Back to the number of minutes. Can the teacher work with the student as tier 2 remediation every other day? Is that what you're saying, that the teacher does it every other day?
Yes. So the teacher, the classroom teacher provides tier 2 every other day. And so if you don't have a built-in intervention time, then that would be some time that I've got to figure out, when can I get, these few kids that are in this, say they're in my first block period and they're struggling, and I'm going to figure out within my block period of first block, when can I sit at the table with, or if I don't have a table and they have desks, when can I pull my chair over to their desk area and give them some additional supports in these areas where they're struggling in algebra. Again, do I need to do some additional modeling for these students? Because these 20 over here are rocking and rolling. They're my tier 1 students, and they're working on an assignment that they're practicing, but these over here are my 3 or 4 that are my tier 3, that I'm going to make sure that I get some of that one-on-one, more personalized me time. And it's really just what you're already doing, truthfully. I mean, when I have my group of students who are struggling, those are the ones that I'm sitting there and I'm working closer with and more closely with. So it's really kind of what you're already doing. You're just documenting, this is what I'm doing for this student.
Changing gears here, we were kicked out of the system right as you were talking about academic versus behavior. So I don't know if I heard what you said about that. But how do you classify a child, a high school child? He chooses not to come to school. Therefore, he's not doing well. Is it academic or is it behavior?
Not attending school is a behavior issue. So we need to figure out, why is he choosing not to come to school? What can we do to convince that child, that being here is what is best for you. This is where you need to be. I know that there are situations where you're not going to be able to convince some kids that this is the best place for you. It's going to happen. Some kids are going to slip through the crack. Unfortunately, we hope not. We surely hope not. Some kids might end up repeating because they refuse to come and refuse to do the work. But we, on our end, have done everything in our power to make sure that we've put structures in place to get that child to come to school, to help that child to understand the importance of being at school, to help that child come up with a plan for the future. And it may not be you, if you are, say, the math teacher, for example, then you're supporting that child, because you're having those little side conversations, of, what did you say you're going to do when you graduate from high school? Oh, you want to do so and so? Well, you got to be here every day. Yeah, that's your typical teacher responses. But you've also got your counselor involved. Counselors have to be involved with these students who are not coming to school and not doing the work. We have to put plans in place to support those students. I know we can say, talk to the parent, talk to the parent. In some cases, that's not going to exactly be the magic fix either. But we're documenting what we've done to help, so that if we do get to that point where this child does fail, for example, we know we did this, we put this in place, we supported her by doing this, we contacted these people. Maybe you have outside resources that can help and partner with you guys. I know that one district works with the local fire department, and they have a group of students who actually go to that fire department for certain minutes out of the week and do some working, I say working, but hanging out with the firemen, and it's kind of a it's not necessarily a check-in, check-out, but that's a positive role model situation. And those kids are looking forward to getting out of school to go to that fire department, but they're getting that positive support, and they're seeing that work ethic, and they're seeing, I can become a fireman, because they talked to them about the program to actually go to the fire academy. And we do have several kids who have graduated from this high school that I'm talking about and gone to the fire academy and become firemen because of that exposure in high school that helped them to understand, okay, I'm coming to school today because today is our fire department day, you know?
Well, with 1,300 students at one school, we can't possibly reach everyone. And especially with all the hats that we personally are having to wear with all the responsibilities at school, I'm just, I'm very overwhelmed and just hope that no one is slipping through the cracks.
And,
That,
that
that's why it takes a team. It takes a team. I'm sorry.
Stephanie,
Go
what'd
ahead,
you say?
Jada. I said that's why it takes a team. That's why your counselors are involved, and you're not doing it yourself. Counselors, administrators, teachers, everyone working together.
right. So don't wear it all on your, don't have that burden on your shoulder that, I am personally responsible for the 1,300 or whatever. You're working, collaboratively with everyone, and you're making your decisions based on data, the fact that you're a good teacher. You're doing what you can do, and it is overwhelming sometimes. I got to tell y'all, I had one of my children said to me several years ago when I was still in the school, when I was an interventionist. She said, Mommy, you care about those school kids more than you care about us. Because I would come home at night and I would talk about those school kids because they weighed so heavy on my heart. Because, like, to me, my kids had everything they needed, but those school kids didn't. And so I feel like, some of your 1,300, it might be the majority, I don't know, but you may feel like, they don't have some of these supports they need. So you're doing the best you can to plug some of those holes, but you can't work magic. You do your best, and you're doing your best for them. Matt, I don't know.
Sorry, I
ahead.
have a question about talking about the behavior in tier 2 as well. It's kind of fallen on me at my school to put kids on the tier 2 if they're having behavior issues, and I've been following the process guide that's provided by our school district, but it doesn't say exactly what type of documentation is required. Like, if they're just on tier 2, would I have to do an ABC form or something of that nature?
No, tier 2 is more of informal documentation. So, if you're doing say the student has a goal for the day, they're you just keep your chart basically. So your chart shows you like what percentage of his goals he met today or she met today. So you're really keeping more informal data for those students. All right, I think we're actually a little over time. So if you guys have any additional questions, here's our email addresses, and I want you to email me if you have specific questions. Email Matt if you have questions. Again, he also, well, you guys are secondary, so the gifted questions are not going to, and if you have EL questions, you will email Sandy Elliott. But we're here to support you guys. And especially in this time, we've still got COVID. We know, you're working hard. You're working smart and hard. So know that we know that. And if we came out to audit, I mean, we don't ever show up at a school and say, oh, let me see if I can get you with this. We show up at a school and we say, how can we help you? How can we help you to implement this? Or how can we help you to support these students? So if you guys have any questions, after this, email us. And it was great meeting with you. Great questions. Y'all had great questions. So have a good Thursday and be safe.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And you say the recording will come to us?
Yes, I will send that to you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.
All right, bye.